Welcome back to the Bible in History. I'm Jeff Johnson, and with me today, of course, is my mother, Rebecca Johnson. And today we're going to continue the talk about the peoples that were kind of stayed closer to the Tower of Babel. Last week, of course, we talked about the Moabites. And we're going to be talking about a few other groups there. I'm going to begin reading Deuteronomy 2, verses 10 and 11, which say, "The Emims dwelt there in times past, a people great and many and tall, as the Anakims, which also were accounted giants as the Anakims, but the Moabites call them Emims."
Absolutely. So we talked last time about Mesopotamia, which for my generation was considered the cradle of civilization. I think probably modern children are being taught that there are multiple cradles of civilization. At this point, of course, evolutionists are claiming that magically they evolved in all these different spots around the same time. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
But of course we know that's not true because of the dispersion. It just was a matter of how long it took to land at a certain location. And they left with a lot of understanding and technology. So what other people groups lived in that area closest to the Tower of Babel? We already have discussed the Akkadians, the Sumerians. We know for a fact there were also the Sabians and the Chaldeans.
Mm-hmm.
The Canaanites were settled in what is now modern-day Israel, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon. They would get their name from the grandson of Noah, Canaan.
Yep.
And they were individual principalities that would unite in war, but would be ruled separately.
Yeah.
Other groups in that area were the Perizzites and the Elamites. These people worshipped multiple gods. Same religion birthed from the Tower of Babel. Their main deity was Baal. Baal required human sacrifice for preparation and for life after death. Human sacrifice to appease the gods. And then they would do burial offerings. They had temple priestesses. This is a common thread throughout the world, the idea of sexuality being tied into the gods.
Yeah.
Which all stemmed from the Tower of Babel. Semiramis was a horrible woman, very loose morals, and that would continue from the Tower of Babel throughout various religions, just under different guises and different names.
Yeah.
The Akkadians referred to the Canaanites as the Kinahoop, meaning people of purple dye. The reason for this is that purple dye was found in the region. It was very difficult to extract from mollusks along the coast. Because it's such a difficult process until we came up with synthetic purples, it was extremely expensive. So purple has always been connected to royalty.
Yeah, because they were one of the
wealth.
few groups that could afford it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is the same region where Lydia, in the New Testament, Paul wins Lydia, the seller of purple, to Christ. This is the same area. She is doing the same work that's been done all these generations, which is pulling purple, natural purple, out of the mollusks, which was a very difficult and time-consuming task, and it drove the price of purple up. Now today, obviously, all of the purple we use is a synthetic purple. You couldn't afford purple from mollusks, and quite frankly, PETA would get involved and stop you. So, but back in the day, this is how it was done. Other kingdoms in this area, as you kind of head south toward Egypt, you had Elasar, Elam, Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Bela. Again, these are small individual kingdoms found closer as you head south, Israel, down closer to modern-day Egypt.
Right.
Unfortunately, almost as soon as they started to settle, leaving the Tower of Babel, the people began warring with each other. There was never a sense of peace and calm. It was always a very satanically driven, one up, get more land, steal from each other type of society. And
Oh, yeah.
we talked in a previous episode about giants before the flood. And we discussed the fact that some people think that giants were the offspring of the fallen angels.
Yeah.
Now, this is why I want to discuss this in detail. We are going to see that giants survived the flood. If in fact they were the offspring of fallen angels, which I do not believe they were, God would have and could have used that opportunity of the flood to erase that entire wicked pagan gene pool out.
Group. Yeah. Yeah.
But he didn't. It's very interesting to me, two specific genetic things came through the ark. Giants and what we call today little people. I don't know why they want to be called little people. To me, that's more offensive, but whatever. That's what they chose. So you've got giants and you've got little people. Both are mentioned in the scripture, and both are mentioned very much throughout history. It's interesting. I did a very in-depth research on giantism and dwarfism. I know. Oh my gosh, I said the word dwarf. Get over yourself. Anyway, it's interesting to note, while there is an issue with pituitary gland, a tumor on the pituitary gland, which can cause extreme giantism today, there are still natural giants. There's we talked about this in the other episode. There's a family in England that had to have a specially designed house because all of them are so tall that the regular houses were a problem. And
didn't work.
They kept hitting their heads on the door frame. So, and there's nothing genetically wrong with them. This is just how they are. The same is true of dwarfism. As they've studied, as far as I have found, they're not really sure why some people come out little and some people don't. I believe that God just likes variety and that there's nothing genetically wrong with either group, the giants or the little people. And they came through the ark, through Noah's family line. So I find that interesting. The Emims, which is what other people call them, lived in the area, and they were giants. We know that David fights Goliath, who is a family of giants. So there are giants. They were quite a large civilization, and they were giants.
There's a lot of giants kind of spread out throughout the world and died out. And so it's very widespread and very common.
Right.
To a degree.
Exactly. And it's interesting to me that they're not the only groups. It's not just the Emims. There's also the Zamzumims who lived in the area, also giants. There were various family groups. It's interesting to note that as I've studied cultural history around the world, in which giants are involved, and they are involved all over the world, there are two predominant family lines of giants. The first family line are the red-haired, peace-loving giants. And in fact, if you listen and read the books written by the native, when you get to Australia, they're going to say that the Maori warriors came first, except that in the Maori warrior traditional history, there's some written about it, and a lot of it is verbal. I'm sorry to say that unfortunately today many people discount verbal histories, and I don't think you should.
No.
They tell you that when the Maori came to New Zealand, when the Aboriginal came to Australia, they were not the first. There were already people there. And their descriptions, it's very interesting, particularly in New Zealand. My thing is caught. There we go. Particularly in New Zealand, is that there were two groups. There were the red-haired giants that lived in the upper land, closer to the mountain ranges of New Zealand. And then there were what we would call little people. They were small people, pale-skinned, and they are actually the ones that give the Maori warrior the idea for the face tattoo. They had face tattoos, and they were small, and they fished at night. They taught the Maoris about fishing and things of this nature. So it's very interesting. You're going to see this again in Peru, Machu Picchu. The base of Machu Picchu is different than the top of Machu Picchu. In building structure, the bottom of Machu Picchu and many of the cities close to that were built by red-haired giants. Then they were run off, and they would then go on, tradition states, that the red-haired giants would go on then to populate Oceania. So there's a second race of giants, though, not a race, a group, family line.
Right.
They are the black-haired giants. Typically, in description, black-haired giants were very violent and typically cannibalistic. You find these in New Guinea. That group was in New Guinea up through World War II, is the last time we have heard of the giants of New Guinea. They were in North America. So giants were everywhere. They were a very dominant force, very, very much a part of society, and quite normal in ancient history.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's important to note. Giants still existed just like dinosaurs still existed after the flood. So
Yeah.
this is part of the reason that I don't believe, personally, my family does not believe, that giants were descendants of demons. Because God had a chance to get rid of them, and he didn't.
Nope.
So, also in this region, all along the region, we have a form of writing, and that's cuneiform. We talked about it last time with the Akkadians and Sumerians. This style of writing is found throughout pretty much all of the Middle East and over into Asia, which is a stylized form of writing, down into Egypt as well. Cuneiform is slightly different than the pictorial writing of Egypt. So you've got the hieroglyphs, which is more of a picture. Then you have the cuneiform, which is more of a shape. Then you have
the individual letterings in the cuneiform look like a little bit like nails.
Yes.
Kind of tapered into different things, and it kind of, the best way I could describe it, you have nails and then they're arranged in a certain pattern, kind of like Braille, but not exactly like Braille. That kind of style where it's different directions of the nails and different lineups would indicate the lettering. So kind of that format.
And it is interesting to note that cuneiform writing would pretty much stick around as a standardized writing form in the Middle East to around 400 BC, 4 to 300 BC. Let me flop that, 4 to 300 BC. So this was a very standardized form of writing. It wasn't, we might consider it primitive because we have chosen our way to write, but it wasn't primitive. It was very complete. They understood everything that was being written. Just because you can't read something doesn't mean it isn't a real language. A lot of people I know cannot read Latin. Well, I happen to be able to read Latin. That doesn't mean Latin didn't exist. It doesn't mean it was a lesser language. In fact, Latin was a more developed language than even our English today. English is one of the most developed languages in the modern world. But Latin was more developed. Chinese is more developed.
Yeah.
Just because it's a different form, don't discredit it in history. So this is happening right near where the Tower of Babel is. Egypt is also going to start around within, I would say, max 3 years, 2 to 3 years from the start of all of these civilizations, right there around the Tower of Babel. The Indus River Valley civilization is going to within the 5-year range, as well as the Chinese and what's going on in Europe. It's going to take slightly more time, but not that much, to get to the Americas.
Yeah.
So I just want to point something out really quickly as we go along. You've heard of, I'm sure, the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me clarify that, first of all, those didn't take a long time. This was a matter of learning what is in your area. Okay. They didn't have to discover how to mine. Jeff mentioned it in a previous episode that if you're in a hurry and you know this tool will work and you don't want to take the time to smelt out something, you're in a hurry, maybe you're on the go, boom, you're going to make yourself a stone tool or arrow head. It has nothing whatsoever to do with your capabilities or knowledge level. As they're traveling, yes, they are going to have maybe what we would consider disposable. It's plastic today. Utensils, let's say, disposable tools, because they need to get where they're going. Once they get there, they need to determine, okay, this is where I can mine for gold, silver, copper, tin, they go.
Yeah.
They knew.
Mining for all that stuff, you have to spend the time to do some searching and some digging, and when you're on the move, you can't spend a couple of months digging randomly for metal that you can smelt down to make a metal sword or something like that. So you're not going to spend the time when you know you're traveling a month away. Well, I could get that distance rather than spend all this time looking for all these different metals. And you just spend the time once you get to your final destination, dig it all up, smelt it, make something. So these ages, the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, all these different ages, they're not so much ages as they are traveling and settling and getting the tools necessary to smelt these things. Because it is a big process.
It is. And be aware that when you read pretty much all literature on a history basis, they're going to have that evolutionary worldview. They need that. Even, sadly, Christians buy into it and put the Stone Age and all this. It isn't true. The amount of time they've listed for it is false. They need to add years, because if you need billions of years for the earth to evolve, where are you going to add time? An easy way to do it is add time in this dispersion period and claim 1,000 years of Stone Age, whereas in reality it would have been maybe 10 years of Stone Age. So keep that in mind when you're reading literature. It's really hard to figure out time frames, because even Christians tend to put an evolutionary spin on ancient history without meaning to, I think. So be aware of that. So next time, I am excited to talk about Egypt. I love talking about Egypt because that is probably, if not at the exact same time as Mesopotamia, very similar time periods, within just months to a year max of each other that they started. So we'll talk a little bit about Egypt next time. Looking forward to it.
Yep, we hope you enjoyed this episode, and we hope you'll join us again next week as we talk about Egypt and all that fun stuff. A lot of interesting things happened in Egypt. I mentioned a lot in the Bible, so it'll get a good focus. So we hope you enjoy that. Join us next week. If you have any questions, email us at thebibleandhistory@gmail.com, or you can comment in the YouTube comment section. We'd love to answer any of those questions. See you next week.
If you enjoyed today's video, please like and subscribe to our channel.
You can also follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, and Google Podcasts.